Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the fifth episode of Specialetalks. I'm super excited for this session because I have my two favorite panelists, Sri and Arutati, and one of the trending topics in the XaaS ecosystem happening right now. So, without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our partner Arjun Rao, who will be moderating the session. Over to you, Arjun. All the floor is yours. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for staying.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dhanush, for
Dhanush.
that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Super excited for today's Specialty Talks episode number 5. We're talking today about the secrets of customer success, a very interesting topic and a subject that has caught a lot of attention over the recent few years and has become a very critical function and has also spawned off many startups in this ecosystem for the SaaS space, right? And just to give a little background about what Specialty Talks is all about, this is hosted by us, Special Invest. We're an early stage VC fund based out of Chennai and Bangalore. We do seed investments and pre-seed investments in enterprise SaaS and emerging tech in the very early stage, up to $500,000, going up to $1 million, and work with founders closely in the first couple of years of evolution, finding product market fit, going to market, identifying the right opportunity, and then scaling from there, right? Our goal with Specialty Talks is to talk to operators, founders who are in the early stage, who are experts in particular domains of SaaS, right, and share their learnings and experiences so that emerging founders, budding founders, and operators learn from these experiences, learn from these conversations, and hopefully that is a value-added thing for the rest of the ecosystem, right? This is episode 5. We're talking about customer success, right? A unique function that has evolved from what used to be just customer service in the earlier avatars of the ecosystem, and customer success service has been around for a long time, but how the domain has changed and how the ecosystem has changed and adopted this to be a critical function for businesses, and how this can impact growth also has been amazing. And we're talking to two amazing people today who have experience in this space and who are working in this ecosystem, executing customer success teams and strategies for their organizations, right? And we'll learn through the conversation today. So without further ado, introducing Arundhati Balachandran. She is Head of Customer Success, Senior Director at ChargeBee, one of India's fastest growing SaaS startups and unicorns in the ecosystem. Right, she's been heading this function for a few years and has a great history and background herself. She's been a founder herself in the past, has done sales and business development in the past, and from there evolving into customer success. I'm sure there'll be some unique learnings there. So welcome, Arundhati, to the conversation.
Thank you, Arjun. Really happy to be here. Thank you.
Super. And the other speaker today, panelist Sri Krishnan Ganeshan. Sri, co-founder, CEO at Rocket Lane, also amazing background. He was a founder first and then sold his company to, again, one of India's largest and first unicorn SaaS companies, Freshworks. Spent some time there, built products and scaled them, right? Has a very keen view to what customer success and customer delight means. And from there, there's a genesis of what he's currently building, his latest startup, which is again super exciting. And we'll hear more about Rocket Lane from him. All right. He's turned entrepreneur again last year and is right in the thick of things. So welcome, Sri, to the conversation. Looking forward to hearing a lot about Rocket Lane, as well as how you've arrived at Rocket Lane and your thoughts on customer success.
Sure. Thanks, Arjun. Thanks for having me on.
Super. So, I just want to start off the conversation talking about, let's start defining what customer success means, right? While it seems like the topic and the function has been around and a lot of people are talking about it, it still is reasonably recent as a function that has been adopted by the SaaS ecosystem and now being adopted by the rest of the ecosystem as well. But let us talk a little bit about what it means to each of you in terms of what is customer success, how do you define it, what is your understanding of how this has come about as a function, what is history, right? So let's just start from there. Arundhati, your thoughts on that, please.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think, see, I have over 15 years of experience in the GTM space. I've done consulting, sales, and now customer success. I think it's given me the entire gamut of experience in terms of dealing with customers right from the time they've been prospects or leads until renewal. So it's been an interesting experience. I've also been able to look at it from a customer's perspective of how they view this journey, as well as an organization's view of how you view the customer's journey, right? So having said that, for me, customer success is at each stage of the journey of the customer. How do you deliver maximum value, and how do you ensure that they grow? Because that indirectly impacts your organization's growth. So to sum it up, I think that's what it is for me, to make the customer successful, um, and get maximum value of the product. Now, from an evolution standpoint, I think I was just looking, I was attending another webinar earlier, and it's like in the 2013, 2014, customer success was very, very similar to customer support, where we were being reactive, solving technical transactional requests from customers. And then it moved on to, okay, now let's focus on adoption, right? So the 2016, 2017 was all about adoption, and how do you make customers adopt your product a lot more, and usage. And now it's become so much more than that, where it's about outcomes, it's about business reviews, it's about consulting with them on their business and being consultative. So that's how I see it. And I've also seen the evolution of my team from, it's been 4 years with ChargeBee now, and how they were staying on top of support tickets and now doing business reviews. And I've seen that change in my organization as well. So we are part of the revenue org now. The customer success is part of the revenue org. I think it's a misconception sometimes that it's a cost center. It's not. So it's absolutely important that we understand that and have clear roles and responsibilities for customer support and customer success.
No, amazing. I think multiple nuggets there, but the key point that I'm taking away, and we will talk a lot more about it, is where does it fit into the organization, and how it is not a cost center, which was what historically customer service, which is, let's say, the originator of this function was, correct, and how that was viewed and how it is viewed today, and how therefore the criticality, how it becomes strategic, right? So very important point. We'll talk a lot about that going forward. Sri, just your thoughts on your journey a little bit, and coming to Rocket Lane, and therefore how you view customer success.
Right. I think the evolution of customer success has, for obvious reasons, with SaaS maturing, customer success has come more and more into prominence, right? So earlier on, when we used to buy software licenses for perpetuity, once you've sold your licenses, you're done with that deal, right? So yes, you need to implement and so on, but the impact on your top line is not there. It may more influence like references and things like that, but other than that, you have the dollar in the bank and you're done. Versus in the 2010 to now, where SaaS has really grown dramatically. Every year the customer chooses to buy your software again, and that's where I think customer success has really come into prominence. Because if last year you weren't successful with the product, this year you will choose to not buy this software again, right? So the renewal mechanism, the subscription mechanism, I think is what brought this function obviously to the fore. And over the years, I think initially, as we all know, as Arundhati also said, things were reactive. I think that the term customer success sort of helped people look at even support in a more proactive way. Though initially, customer support may have taken the title of customer success. It's just sometimes the labels you use matter so much, right? So you call it success, then the orientation of a team is more about, okay, I'm solving this problem, but I also see this other problem. How do I solve it for my customer? So it sort of becomes about making your customers successful. And to me, from there, what's happened is, yes, there's been a lot more focus on value delivery. That's sort of become an important piece. But also from a SaaS metrics standpoint, we used to initially focus on churn, right? So we used to say, hey, customer success team needs to control churn. But one of the most important metrics that's emerged, which determines the valuation of a company has become NRR, or net revenue retention. And I think with that metric coming into prominence, becoming one of the most important metrics that everyone looks at to evaluate a SaaS business, CS teams have come to the fore a lot. Like, I mean, there is a seat at the table for a CS leader in every organization. They're gaining in importance. I can see customer success leaders getting promoted to CRO in some organizations, right? So it's I think my co-founder was recently in a listening to a Clubhouse talk about the world of CS, and one of the interesting things that was mentioned there was it's no longer about the first dollar in. It's about how you're growing it to $5 to $8 over a period of time, and hence I think CS has become so important, right? So that I think is the evolution and importance of where CS is going. The other key contributor being the movement, the whole PLG movement and usage based billing, right? So if you're not just charging for licenses for users or like a annual package, and instead you're making money as a SaaS business based on how customers are using your product, how much they're using of it, it becomes more and more important for you to focus on the growth and business goals of your customer. Are you helping them hit those goals? Are you doing more for them? Are they able to get more value from you? And that's when it translates into revenue for you.
No, I think amazing points there. The point about titles and tags, right? Labels is very interesting, right? I'm hearing, of course, customer success. Delight is customer delight seems to be the other, word, right? Even taking it further, it's not just getting them successful, but they should be so happy with it. And I think that ties into your next point of if there is delight, then that leads to not only retention but genuine upgradation and therefore spending more, right? And using more features and therefore being super sticky, right? And the NRR part, I think we'll talk about that a lot more going forward in terms of metrics, churn, NRR, and what other metrics play in, right? Becoming super critical, right? Makes sense. So you want to talk a little bit about Rocket Lane and what you're trying to do. It seems to me, again, what Arundhati mentioned, customer success is not just reactive and later after you've sold,
Right.
and once people are using, right? It starts very early, right?
Right.
And sometimes I'm thinking it is starting at pre-sales level. Maybe I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but definitely right at the start it is, and that's part of your vision and your thinking of what you're building. Right? Talk a little bit about that. How you thought about customer success such early stage of the journey and what Rocket Lane is doing to solve that problem.
Right. So I think we sort of started Rocket Lane because we felt there was one ignored part of the whole customer journey. While pre-sale, you have your CRM and others, sales enablement focused tools, sales engagement focused tools, etc. Post-sale, you have support systems and you have customer success tools that come in and do a great job for setting up your renewal playbooks, setting up your QBR related playbooks, alerts for when usage drops and all those kind of things. But if you look at the onboarding journey, like someone closed a deal and you need to initially make that customer live on your software, you need to deliver that first value for the customer. That piece was left to like, hey, here's a Google sheet, go and figure it out, or here are some documents, sending like a ton of links to the customer, catching up on weekly calls where you're going through a checklist together probably, and the customer's telling you, no, sorry, I didn't get time to do all of this. And it's a little all over the place, right? So you have these emails with action items floating around, which the customer probably ignores till it's just before the next meeting. You have your spreadsheet trackers, maybe 4 trackers per customer, and there's no way for a head of CS or head of implementation be on top of all of those documents across all customers. So it suffered from a lack of visibility. It suffered from a way to keep things consistent and organized across all the customers you're executing with. And that's where we thought there should be a better way. And there should be a way in which you can put the customer at the center of the experience as well. because think about what your customer is being subjected to. They're being sent like a bunch of documents, multiple spreadsheets to be on top of, and you're getting on calls and telling them, hey, you haven't completed these items. And a leader on the customer side, who's bought this software, paid like $80,000 for it, has no clue where things stand unless you send like a weekly status update and they are copied on it, right? So how do we transform that into an experience where it's more transparent for everyone? We make it consistent, because one of the biggest problems, if you go to any startup, they would say, they rely more on specific people and heroics of those people to make their customers successful initially. And how do we move from that being people driven to more system driven, right? So those are some of the things we took up and said, okay, let's build something new for this, where we put the customer at the center. We make it a repeatable process that you can have your team adhere to, create the right visibility for your team, for your leaders, and for the customers. And that's where Rocket Lane was born.
Very cool, very interesting, pocket where, you start engaging with the customer and making sure, they're successful in getting started and that first dollar in, right?
Right.
Really, I just wanted to go
I
for it.
just want to say, I believe success starts there, right? At onboarding. It shouldn't be like after onboarding that you hand off a customer to customer success, which is what happens in a lot of organizations, right? Instead, CS, there may be a separate implementation team as well, but CS team needs to partner and be there, watching out for value delivery for the customer. As you said, Arjun, even probably from like when a deal is 80%, 90% done.
Maybe. Yeah, I think this is super insightful, right? Arundhati, just wanted to understand your journey at ChargeBee, right? When you joined, what was the state of customer success? Was there anything like that? How early was it? And what were early conversations that you had, right, with the leadership in terms of how they were thinking about it of when you joined? And was that about 4 years ago to now, and how it has evolved, right? Just talk to us a little bit about the early days, right? Motivations that you heard from the organization, where was it? And what you had to do to just set that up on day zero.
Sure. Interestingly enough, I joined ChargeBee as a sales development head, and I set up the assembly line of LDR, SDR, and AEs. And then that's when, and we didn't have a customer success function. This was early 2018, and we had, I think by the end of the year, we had hired 2 or 3 customer success managers just for our very large customers who needed a lot more engagement on a day-to-day basis. And I think
Can you give a sense of what size the organization was at that point in time?
I think we were about a couple of $1 million in revenue at that point.
Okay, got it.
A little more than that, yeah. So I think it was interesting to say, so one of the things I always say is the minute you have paying customers, invest in customer success, because you want to make sure somebody's focusing on adoption. I think Shri alluded to, definitely onboarding is very, very important. And I think it's a much ignored aspect of it. Whether onboarding belongs in the CS function or it sits outside, depending on the complexity of your product. But I think it's really, really important that once onboarding is done, the CSM's main priority is adoption, customer education. And it doesn't matter if you're 500K in revenue or $1 million in revenue. You want stickiness, which means adoption is key. So I would say invest in it as soon as possible, or even if you have support, get some of them to handle transactional requests and get some of them to handle the adoption part of it. So we didn't do that. I think one of the learnings was that for us. And we had 2 or 3 CSMs who were staying on top of support tickets, even though we had support agents doing the same thing. So that's when we realized, what we really, and honestly, this is my first foray into customer success. So one of the biggest learnings was, what is the difference between a customer success manager and a support agent, right? So that was the first thing to figure out from an operational standpoint, but also from a founder standpoint. They wanted to invest in customer success because the unique thing about ChargeBee is we cater to both SMB and mid-market. And SMB means you do have the leaky bucket problem, right? So they said, can we figure out why customers are churning? At that point, we didn't know if what the churn that we are seeing is all right, is it industry benchmarks, because you're going to have churn no matter what, but is it okay, is it a good number, is it, is it too bad? So we had to figure that out. So that was the first thing we did, was so getting CSMs to focus on retention and what we needed to do for that, right? And also, interestingly enough, we did one thing, which was, how HR conducts exit interviews with employees that are leaving. We started doing exit interviews with customers who are no longer interested in Charge. And that gave us a lot of insight into what we need to build, both in terms of whether it was feedback to product or services, and what we needed to do proactively, right? And also flag these high risk customers much early on, so it's not like we're fixing it when it's too late. So that was the first thing that we solved for with the 3-4 CSMs that we had, just to get the process in place. And there are these 3 things that we did, which is, I think for me, I come from a data driven background, analytics. So what we did was, first we figured out all the data. I invested in a CS ops person to figure out, okay, let's figure out, we have so many, I think at that point we had about 2,000 customers, and we said, okay, what segments do they belong to? Let's segment them by revenue, and then see what kind of engagement is needed for each of these segments, and whether it is automated, whether it's high engagement, because it depends on the industry and the growth stage that the customers are at in terms of how much help they need from a CSM. So that was first. So the CS ops person helped crunch that data and helped us understand so many things about how many CSMs do we need to hire, because typically a CSM handles up to 1.5 to 2 million portfolio value, and that helps you understand how big a team do you project for the rest of the year and things like that. So we figured that out, and then we worked on the churn problem, and then we also looked at, we suddenly became part of the revenue org, and which means we also needed to focus on expansion.
When was this transition to the revenue org?
Same time. It was all at the same time, because we were a year or two late in establishing all this. So it was all at the same time. I think since I came from a sales background, I think it was like, fix the churn, let's fix the churn, let's look at expansion as a process, as a framework. And I think that's, so it happened all at the same time. But I think at any time, even now, right, after 4 years, I tell my team, have this decision framework, right? Whether it is retention, expansion, or advocacy, your first priority is always retention and stickiness. Then comes expansion, because that takes care of the advocacy part of it. So those are the 3 main pillars of customer success. And Shri spoke about NRR. NRR is nothing but expansion minus churn. You want expansion to be happening. You also want to control your churn. So I think, and it's 5 times more expensive to get a new customer. So focus on retention first, always, irrespective of which stage you're at as a company.
Got it. Very interesting. I think the 3 pillars are an interesting framework to keep in mind, right? Retention, expansion, and advocacy. And we'll go a little deeper into that. And probably also, I'll come back to having you define, right? Because we're talking about churn, we're talking about NRR. Let us define that a little bit for the audience, just for clarity and understanding, so that we can build on top, and then we can say, oh, okay, these are the pillars, and right. But I'll just come back, because I wanted to take a moment to talk to Shri about, at his stage, at your stage of building Rocket Lane. Of course, you're building a product which is customer success focused for onboarding phase, of course, right? But do you already have customer success at your org?
Yeah, I mean,
what stage are you? You have few customers, early paying customers. Just to talk a little bit about your stage and how you are talking about thinking about setting up your customer success org.
Yeah, we have our first bunch of customers in already, and it's growing every month at a rapid pace, which we didn't expect. But at the same time, I would say the way I think about, so ours is not a highly technical product, so we don't need your more traditional customer support function. At least for now, we don't believe we need that function, because all of us on the GTM side, whether it's a salesperson or customer success, whoever it is, we can all help. So for us, our first hire was this guy called Anirudh on the GTM side, and he came from a inside sales background. But we said, hey, you know what? Me and him are going to do sales, customer success, onboarding, everything together to start with, right? And you don't have the luxury of hiring one person for each role initially. Um, but now, 2 months after, I think 1 month after we went live with our product, we hired our first person focused exclusively on customer success. So we have 4 people on the GTM side now, out of which I would say all of us are focused on customer success, definitely. But maybe, 2 of us are focused on sales, 2 of us are focused on like, um, you know, onboarding and sort of
Post-sale success,
pre-sale,
we call it that.
yeah, and pre-sale demos, etc. as well, right? So among the 4 of us, we sort of have groups which function as
Sure.
each of these roles. We don't have a traditional customer support role today. Maybe we will have in the future, but I've also seen orgs like Typeform where everyone is only customer success. They're saying, hey, you know what is sales doing? Sales is supposed to make the customer successful. So let's not, like, when it's very, I guess, PLG-ish as a product, maybe
Yeah.
success is the only function you need to focus on for a very long time. When people buy on their own and you're not like reaching out and selling, you're just helping them buy and helping them get successful once they buy. So
Yeah.
just CS, right? So I think for us, we are investing early in CS, but I think right now our focus is still on the onboarding part of CS. Adoption, we have some, one kind of playbook we are following right now. We haven't yet come to renewal playbooks or those kind of things because it's too early in our journey to flesh out all of that.
Got it. Got it. I think I think both your conversations leading me to say, that's how this has evolved 3-4 years ago, right? At $1 million or little more was when somebody woke up, or a team and an organization woke up to say, okay, I think we need this function, or we need people to be particularly focused on this. While now you are right at the beginning, at least having people focus on this aspect, whether they are dedicated to this function or not, will evolve as you grow and as your number of customers grows. But that is the big change, right? In 3 to 4 years, it has become serious because it is so valuable, right? Which is very, very interesting, right? Either of you want to take a shot at just that definitions part or 101 part of retention, expansion, and advocacy that you spoke about, and how that ties into key metrics at each of those stages, correct, for an organization to optimize, right? Arundhati, I know you were talking about churn, right? Maybe that was the first North Star metric within the organization that you had to focus on, right? So talk a little more about that and maybe throw some more light on just the definitions for the audience.
Sure, sure. So, the first time we looked at churn, there's quite a few things you can do with it, right? To understand better, like I said, the problem was to figure out, is this okay? Is it okay for how do we look at the health of the existing customer base, right? And so one of the things we figured out was, once we segmented our customers, we saw churn by segment. Because startups, until they hit 1 million, the chances of them even shutting down is higher, right? That is something we categorize as unavoidable, or something that we can't. It's not in our control in terms of what we can do about it. So we broadly classified churn into avoidable and unavoidable, where unavoidable was not in our control. So we can keep that away. But looking at things that we can control, did we, and also categorizing the whole churn into early churn and late churn. So the early churn is usually when customers leave you while onboarding or right after sale, and that's when actually we are seeing more. We were seeing more churn, because if you look at the startup segment, they don't have the time or the bandwidth to prioritize onboarding. And I'm sure Shri can talk more about this, since that's his space now. But I think one of the things we see is, we see how do we keep them honest? How do we keep our customers honest in terms of, hey, you're paid for this, let's get you onboarded. And one of the main metrics during that early onboarding cycle is time to value that we track now, which is the time to value is nothing but the first value that your customer sees right after buying the product. And you want them to get there as soon as possible. So they see the value, so they stick around, right? And that is something that, so the turnaround time for that has to be, so we keep baselining that and seeing how soon can we get a customer to go live and realizing that first value. That is the one thing during the early part of it. The second is also, there are there might be gaps in your onboarding process, inefficiencies, or it could even be handoff. We spoke about sales to onboarding, the handoff process. If someone drops the ball there, and or it's even the qualification issues. Are you onboarding your ideal customer profile, your ICPs, or are you, do they have product? Is it qualified? Tech? Is there a tech win done? So things like that are what caused early churn, and we figured out processes for that early stage of it to figure out how do we control it. Then you have the late churn aspect, which is it is usually because of a customer has outgrown your product, where you feel like they've realized the first value, they've been using the product, but they feel like maybe I need to go with someone. As my complexity of use cases increases, I might need to go to another company who's at a later stage in the same competitive space. Like for example, I've seen customers say, "Hey, we didn't focus on e-commerce before, Sharjbi. Now it's a huge focus. But back then we had some e-commerce customers which went to our other competitors who were actually really focusing on e-commerce and had more complex use cases handled by their product." So that's one of the reasons for late churn, and the other is also a customer success not delivering value on an ongoing basis, because your work is not done after sale. It's definitely not done after onboarding, and then there is that's why you have that customer success to keep having this adoption as a main metric to go on. So if you fix all this, right, from a churn standpoint, I look at it as early churn, late churn, the reasons behind it, and then also categorizing them as avoidable, unavoidable. So you only focus on avoidable and see how much you can bring that down. The other learning we had was don't look at churn as absolute numbers. For example, as your revenue grows, you're going to see more churn, right? And suddenly when you see that, oh, we had maybe 500K of churn in the first year and we had $1 million, we're like, everybody is like, why do we have $1 million of churn? But if you look at churn as a percentage of revenue, then it puts everything in perspective. So from an industry benchmark standpoint, if you're catering to SMBs, anywhere between 3 to 5% of churn rate is very good. And we've been able to use that now as we have scaled, and much more than what we were 4 years ago. Churn rate is what we look at to see how we are doing from a churn standpoint. And every team in ChargeBee now, we now run a churn SWOT, where initially it was only a customer success problem, but then we had to educate everybody else, saying we need everyone's help. So I run a churn SWOT of all the GTM teams, sales, onboarding, CS, and product, to ensure that we are meeting every week to address high risk customers and their problems and fix that proactively. So it's been going on for a year now, and we're not going to ever move away from that model, because it's all the more important to figure out as a squad. So that's something we're doing. And I think I'll let Sri talk about the other metrics, but I think these are some of the things that have changed with how we look at it from the beginning to now.
Got
Yeah, I
it.
think one of the things Arundhati mentioned, which is I think important, is to look at churn in different cuts. If you take your SMB customers, calculate churn separately for them. Or if you have some sort of industry verticals, identify what is the churn like for each of those verticals, because that's going to give you that insight of, okay, here is where the fit isn't happening for some reason. Here is where we're failing. Hey, large customers are churning. Why is that? Maybe onboarding needs to be very different for large customers versus the smaller ones. So you'll start identifying those patterns. From a definition perspective, I think that couple of uh, types of churns that people track. One is your dollar churn, which is in terms of like how much revenue churn, right? Which is what is the primary measure usually. Uh, and then there is also logo churn, which is like what percentage of your customers or how many customers churned in each month or each quarter or each year, right? So that's sort of the two things to sort of look at from a churn perspective, because and the reason why you need to keep working on bringing that down is, when we say, hey, there is a percentage of your revenue numbers which is going to churn each year, there is also a percentage that you're adding, right, in terms of new customers and new revenue. And initially you may be adding 100% or 300% and so on, but over a period of time your new revenue comes down to, okay, I'm going to add 50% this year, I'm going to add 30% this year on top of my existing revenue base. And when you think of it, if your churn catches up with that, right, when if both become equal, then your whole company is going to stagnate. And that's why you need to really figure out at every point in time, how am I either figuring out new areas of growth where I can really keep my, you know, revenue growing at 80%, 100%, even on a large base, which is very, very hard. Or you need to really figure out how to control churn. Otherwise, growth will become stagnant.
Got it. And from this, and particularly talking about revenue growth and that delta number finally being positive and to a certain expectation, both internally for the org and also for investor, benchmarking, right? That is where the NRR discussion comes in, which you initially brought up, right? So let's talk a little bit about the NRR. Firstly, the definition and what you see in the industry as acceptable, good, very good, and exceptional NRR numbers, right? That'll be very relevant, I think, in this conversation.
Yeah, I think one thing I would like to mention there is, maybe from a very layman perspective, the way to understand NRR, I would say, is if you look at, let's say you acquired 100 customers last year, right? And some of them have grown, some of them have, churned, and these 100 customers were paying you, let's say, $1,000 when they first got started with you. And now, because some of them have left, that contributed to like a $200 decrease in your revenue from 1,000. But the others, maybe, some of them grew, and maybe one of them grew rapidly, and they all added $500 of revenue. So overall, from the same pool of 100 customers, you now have only 89 customers left, but their contribution to your revenue has changed from $1,000 to $1,300. Now that, so your NRR in this case is 130%, right? So you have sort of what was $100 became $130, rather $1,000 became $1,300. So that is how NRR is defined. And the reason why this is so important is just think of the beauty of it, right? Like you acquire $100 worth of revenue this year. If it automatically grew another 30%, the next year, that's like a gift that keeps giving in a way, right? So you just acquire new customers, make them successful, and even if you don't add any new customers, your business is still growing.
Right.
And
So this has
that's
nothing to do with new customer acquisition. This is with existing
correct.
customer base, you're increasing revenue. That is just
Correct.
beautiful, right?
Yeah. So that's why it's become such an important and powerful metric for a lot of companies. Now, when you say, hey, my revenue grew from 80 million last year to 120 million this year, people have started looking at what percentage came from new customer acquisition, what percentage came from your existing customers' growth. And so having a healthy NRR automatically means your valuation looks better, as long as like you're not like completely stalled on getting new customers. So if you have the same new customer growth, better NRR obviously means like you're going to grow so much faster, and it's sort of a special metric because it has that cumulative advantage over a period of time where your customers keep growing with you.
Right. And the proxy, the way I'm thinking about it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it means that your customers are getting more value out of your product on an ongoing basis, year on year, whatever, quarter on quarter, year on year. And maybe they're also growing. Correct. Both of those are, multiplier effects for your underlying revenue and your growth in your business. And that is why it becomes so exciting, right? That you have more sticky customers, they love you more, they pay you more, right? And that proxy is an amazing metric to see that a great product and a great business is working.
Yeah, I think Arundhati mentioned about late churn. And the reason being people outgrow your product. So imagine if they don't outgrow it, if you're able to service them as they grow, that leads to like better NRR, right? So someone started small with you, but they're able to scale with you, and their business grows, their usage grows, your revenue grows from them.
Got it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And the job of the customer success in this aspect, right, of enabling an existing customer to grow with you, or you grow with them, right? what are key aspects of that, right? When you say, okay, late churn, what do you focus on? How do you, right? Is there specific tactics? Is there specific playbooks that are being used to enable your existing customers to do that?
Right.
Arundhati?
I'll take that. Yeah. See, I have my team structure is it determines that also. So one of the reasons, in early days we had CSMs and CS ops, and CSMs were handling both. They had basically KPIs for both retention and expansion. And what we saw within 1 quarter of it was, how I think a lot of people have asked me on LinkedIn, reached out to me on LinkedIn, say, how do you hire a CSM? What kind of a background should they have? Should they be from sales? Should they be from product? And they were having this confusion within the team as to, hey, should I focus on retention or should I focus on expansion? And I feel uncomfortable selling to a customer who I'm trying to build a relationship with, right? So there was this conflict of interest. And we saw that, and we also didn't know how to hire, because we was like, should we hire more consultative people or should we hire more salesy people? So what we did was, we did an experiment where we created another role called account manager, and I took some lessons from my time with sales, where the SDR AE model, where the SDR is responsible for booking a demo, giving signals of a prospective customer, and then the AE actually comes and negotiates pricing and closes the deal, right? So we did something similar here, where CSMs only focused on relationship was their primary focus area, and they also were responsible to give us signals of fast growing customers who might be ready to be upsold to. So they are trained on data and usage, where they look at using, say, hey, this is a potential upsell opportunity. And then they bring in the account manager who has quota targets. And they negotiate pricing, and the CSM always acts as a trusted advisor for the customer, even during these calls when an AM is talking. So they work as tag teams to ensure that one is focusing on that the customer experience is not compromised, and the selling is done very, very based on data driven and of value driven selling, versus, we have all this data of the customer, please. And I always say it's a sin not to use it for a customer success team, because in sales we don't have that much, right? We are shooting in the dark sometimes, and just working with data that's publicly available. So here it's all data driven selling. So we completely split the roles and responsibilities between CSMs and account managers. And that way, the account managers take care of the expansion part of it. The CSMs have retention KPIs as well. And that takes care of the NRR. Because NRR is nothing but net retention, which is expansion minus churn. And we saw a 6x growth in our expansion with this experiment over 1 quarter in 2018. Wow. And now we have a team of account managers working with CSMs, and again, for different segments. That's really helped us. So we have different playbooks for both retention and expansion that way.
Understood. No, very interesting.
Nice.
Sri, you were saying something?
Yeah, just to add, I think in terms of fast growing companies from your cohort of customers that you're working with, some of the playbooks I've seen in use, one is a re-implementation playbook, right? So it's like, hey, you know what? We implemented our software this way for the customer when they were at this size, but now their org has changed, right? So they have all these different geographies with different leaders, and they need like a different setup in your tool. So you need to reconfigure your product to continue delivering value in the new world that the customer has grown into. Right. So as they grow into different configurations of their company, and their business is transforming, your product needs to adapt to it, and it's not going to, I don't think there's AI to do that yet. So you need to be aware, and then you need to do it. And then one of the ways that can happen is you form like these joint success plans with the customer, where every quarter there is obviously a QBR that you're doing with your larger customers, but you're also measuring against, hey, this is our plan for the next 3 quarters. Where are we, right? So large orgs don't transform within like 2 or 3 quarters typically. So you will have a longish plan. It may get reset in the next quarter when they have a reorg, things change, etc. But then you also at least have that plan at all times, and you know what success means to them, and you're all having the same definition of what is success for that customer.
Got it. See, just for the audience again and clarity, QBR is what and where is it used? Just to help explain that aspect.
Yeah, it's quarterly business review. It's basically something that a customer success person does as a business review meeting with execs on the customer side. It may be called EBR or executive business review when you involve like larger execs on the customer side, like the keys, EVPs and sponsors who are there. And the idea is to get together and align on what is success for that business and do a review of how you have been delivering value, right? So here are areas where we delivered value, and here is how you are using our product. And hey, here's the benchmark for how you should be using our product. Other customers like you have accomplished so much success with us. You're lagging. And it's not on us, it's also on you to deliver, to derive more value from our product. So it's about showcasing, for example, if you take chat support, right? Uh, Walking into EBR or QBR, I can give them a scorecard on how their support team is doing using our product. And I can say, hey, if you turn on these three features, you can improve on these dimensions, by the way. You aren't doing it for some reason, or like your team is not aligned with doing this the right way. Your first response time is, you know, 2 minutes instead of 40 seconds. The industry benchmark is 40 seconds to get back on chat, but you're taking 2 minutes. So you need to change that. You need to set new targets for your team so that they get back sooner. And that's how your CSAT is going to increase for your customers, because your abandoned chat rate is much higher than the industry average. So you take business metrics, you form benchmarks, you give them goals. They also come with their goals from your software. They may have cost saving goals. They may have like, CSAT goals. They may have other kinds of goals depending on what kind of software you are. And then you're going to measure against those goals and tell them where they are on the goals they set. Also give them new ways to think about their own goals, because you're consultative, right? So you're trying to add value beyond what they already know as well, based on what you have learned from other customers in that industry or cohort, uh, or like your own thought leadership.
Got it. Got
I
it.
want to add one thing to what Shri said. I think so. That's exactly it, right? So one of the things from a very operational standpoint, what we do is a prospect came to us because they had a pain point, right? And those get captured by the sales team. So what we do is when that gets handed over to CS, our first QBR. So now we have a process of what a first QBR should look like and what could be the agenda, and we revisit that. Hey, you had this pain point. You're completely onboarded now. Have you solved it, or are you in the process, or what do you think? Well, how has ChargeBee in our context solved your problem? And then we figure out, okay, what is the priorities for this quarter for you? And sometimes we ask, we use OKRs as a success metric for our organization. We ask, what are your OKRs for this quarter, which we can help with our product? And these give us very actionable takeaways. And then to come back end of the quarter or end of 6 months, however long that takes, to say, here is what we tracked and here is how, and also recommend here are the components of the product that you could use, because we have about 400 plus features and not every customer is going to use it, right? So when we talk about adoption, our adoption plan also has to be customized for a specific customer. So these conversations really, really help in doing that engagement aspect of it, and then revisiting and closing the loop with the customer, saying you wanted this, you had this pain point, and we've been able to make so much progress, and that really keeps the customer really happy. And the other thing is also there are customers, I read somewhere a typical SaaS business of our size has about 92 or 200 vendors. And imagine getting on a QBR call with each one of them, right? We cannot, it's impossible. So the other is also to realize how to do these business reviews in scale. How do you do one-to-many? How can you productize some of these ROI metrics? That's also one of the goals for me in this year. Hopefully next year we solve it using product and getting that done. So.
No, I
I
think
think
very,
that's
very
that's a beautiful idea, and I've seen in there's this chat product called Drift, in which when you log in, the first thing you see is like 88 meetings booked using Drift in the last month. So immediately okay, this is not something I can do away with. It gave me 88 new meetings. So it's like focusing on what value you got. And then it could also be saying, hey, if you do this, if you turn on this additional thing, you're going to get more meetings, or that's like the product nudging people towards being more successful using their software.
No, some amazing insights there, right? I think one thing I'm taking away is, how there's always constant engagement with the customer to understand how they're using the product, why they're using, are they right? That is always continuously seems to be feeding back. And I think what was very interesting is what both of you mentioned in different ways. I think one is this productization of this entire workflow and therefore ability to scale. And I think Shri, you mentioned, there's no AI to understand that customer is, getting to the next level. Maybe there will be someday, but that brings me to the topic of saying what are the tools available today for CS teams, right? What have you seen in the market, in the industry? What are you using already, right? And you think any exciting, interesting, really value-added tools for CS teams to be more successful themselves are coming in, right? Just throw some lights on what you have used, you've dabbled with, and what you are maybe seeing coming up, right? We're actually, again, just as investors, we'll see a few new startups trying to solve some pieces of these puzzles and build very interesting products. So I just want to hear from your vantage point as teams using tools and products, SaaS tools and products. What are these that come into your toolkit?
Arundhati, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think, see, the customer success tool was the first thing that we implemented in the early days, which is we use Churn Zero. I think for us, we needed an agile product. At that point, Gainsight we were too early for Gainsight, right? They were the pioneer. They are the pioneers of customer success, but we were too early for Gainsight. So we were looking for a smaller, lighter tool. And then I think Churn Zero really fit our needs at that point. And
what does a tool like Gainsight or Churn Zero, what is the high level, promise that they provide?
Right. So I think I mentioned, retention was our first objective, right? So one of the main things that these customer success tools enable us with is automated health scores. You want to know who are the customers who are in the green or who are healthy using your product. And then you also want to know who are the customers who could be that flagging the high risk customers. Now, when we have the churn SWOT, I get all this data from the tool. I don't need to crunch it manually. And imagine the sheer volume of the customers, right? So when your number of customers are higher, you want a tool that automates these health scores and gives you an idea of here are the ones in amber or red, and you might want to focus on this. And then the ones who are on green, again, they go into my expansion and retention playbooks, right? So that this data, health scores is definitely as a basis of both our playbooks. And also for advocacy. If a customer is in the green using our product a lot, that means they can talk a lot about it. They can give us case studies, testimonials, references for new prospects and things like that. So that helps us also help the sales team win more deals as well. So that is one thing from the churn score. The other from the Churn Zero aspect of it for a customer success tool. The other is also dashboards. So we mentioned all these metrics, churn, expansion. You want to know where you stand every day, right? So I think the dashboards are very specific to customer success metrics like churn. And when I said churn, they also give you an idea of how you can, set up, customize it to how you calculate metrics. We are a very metrics-driven function, and so I use churn, avoidable churn, early churn, late churn, everything within churn. I have so many metrics that I track, NRR, and then we also track GRR, which is only churn and without the expansion, what that looks like. And then from an expansion standpoint, verticals, post-pandemic, industry-based metrics has been so important for us. So we segment these customers, and a customer success tool gives you the opportunity to segment customers by revenue, by industry, whatever you want, however you want to slice and dice it. You just need to go. It's already set. That's why the CS Ops team is really, really crucial for setting all this up, and the automations. For example, now I have a 40-member team, so we've come a long way from the 3 to 4 CSMs, and each of them need notifications on health score changing, or signals for upsell, or here is a customer who has an escalation for more than 5 days. So different things, and these all need to be automated. So that's pretty much what I look for in a CS tool. And email automation, sometimes CS tools don't have a very in-depth, so we use HubSpot and the help, for email automation. But that's something that I feel sometimes as an investor, you might think that's because engagement is a huge aspect of CS, and I haven't really seen email automation being very nicely done in a CS tool, whereas it's very well done in a Salesforce or a CRM tool.
So basically, there is one is engagement, and then there is data insights and intelligence, right? What you're saying is seems like is well solved, or there are platforms that are providing it pretty comprehensively.
Yeah.
But workflow/engagement workflow could be better. Maybe that's a wish list, right? Maybe founders out there listening, one startup idea, right? An area to focus on. Shri, your thoughts, any tools that you have used and that you've come across, or again, your wish list also of what could be done better, what could be available in the ecosystem. Of course, you're building one yourself, but beyond that.
Yeah, I think onboarding tools are definitely one of those which you would want to use as well, because right from impressing the customer early in that journey, partnering with them the right way, holding each other accountable in that path to delivering first value, something like this helps. But beyond that, I think a lot of companies, before they move to full-fledged CS tools, often what I've seen is they have some sort of task-oriented playbook that they create for customers in like regular project tools itself. And we see some of our customers doing that in our tool, saying, "Hey, before I buy like a full-fledged, uh, you know, customer success tool, do I have the option of just adding some more tasks at day 60, day 90, day 120, whatever, so that I have this check-ins with the customer. It's a task on my team's plate." So that's one approach I've seen. And from an adoption metrics, etc. standpoint, I've seen people use regular analytics software also for understanding like product usage. So this is maybe more for like enterprise customers, where maybe in your early days you're just dealing with like 8 or 10 customers, and it's um growing to 20 customers in the next year. All are large enterprise, and you don't want to necessarily implement this whole CS tool, push data into it, etc. If you just have like a mix panel or something that the product team is using anyway, take access of that and slice and dice and look at how people are using it. This is not going to give you the automations, alerts, etc. But if you have a monthly check-in, weekly check-in with some of these larger customers, which is what happens, then before that check-in, you can look at, okay, how has the usage been? Is there any change? Which features are used, not used, etc.
It will give you a basic dashboard and data insight about
correct.
customer.
It's a manual way of doing what the CS tool would do.
Scaling, it might be valuable.
Correct. Other than that, I think they're probably tools focused on adoption. There's Whatfix and that category where user onboarding. So if I'm like focused on customer onboarding overall, what about each individual user who starts using this tool? Yes, you can do training, and there is software for training also, right? So how do you do better customer education? There's software for that. But in product training, in product guidance is another thing which will help you. It may fall under products or growth teams bucket, but I think being aware of that as an activity from a CS perspective, how do we make the customer successful? Their team needs to learn to use the product. So I think that also is, in a way, it's a CS tool as well. So those are some, I would say.
I'm just thinking out loud. Some of this is inspiration from the B2C world, right? Of how do you nudge a customer through a particular usage journey, right? And can you give prompts and tips and nudges, that enable you to get to the end goal, right? And move you through the funnel for whatever is end conversion goal, right? And that has influenced the SaaS world drastically. And we already, I think she mentioned this, of how PLG is becoming so intrinsic to SaaS selling, right? And this is one of those elements, is my little understanding.
there's it's not just for the PLG world. Even if you're implementing Salesforce or Workday or any of those, big tools for your whole organization, now when each of them start using it, you want them to use it a certain way, right?
Yeah,
So actually, what Fix does interestingly is not just saying, "Hey, I'm going to sell to Salesforce," but they're saying, "Hey, for any company using Salesforce, which has a large team, and they want to make their Salesforce implementation successful, add Whatfix, customize Whatfix for that customer." Because you know what? Everyone's sales process varies, and
yeah,
Salesforce allows you to define that process. On top of that, now Whatfix is going to come and guide that person as to, okay, in Toyota, this is how you need to use Salesforce, right? So these are the next steps you need to do. So it sort of becomes a uh, adoption and learning mechanism within each org for a specific product or across products within that org.
yeah. Very interesting. I think we've also, of course, on the training side and the customer education side and learning side, we've seen some new age tools come up, new companies that are being set up as we speak, that are trying to solve that problem of how can you create better customer learning and education videos,
Right.
walkthroughs, demos, right? These are all part of, continued engagement and ease of adoption, right? And
Right.
I think there are massive opportunities there yet to be solved,
Yeah.
is the way I look at it, right? Great. I was curious to see, both of you, through your experiences and even while you're doing it now, any companies that you look up to that have really nailed customer success, right? Or you like that approach of customer success? Those are benchmarks for you. Those are aspirational for you and your org. And okay, this. Of course, it need not be just one. It could be more than one that you fuse, and then you form your own version and your own playbook, right? We just want to hear the best, customer success companies and playbooks out there that you have observed.
Sure. I think for me, see, for sure, I learned, and still I'm learning a lot from Gainside because they created this category, and that was tough. And when no one knew what customer success was, they were able to create the category, make it a success. And I've learned a lot about how to data driven strategies from the whole aspect of it. And also, even though I don't use Gainsight yet, we might eventually end up using it as we need it. But I think that's one thing that I really like. But my biggest influences before I go into the theoretical aspect, which is Gainsight, is Slack and Drift. And I know Sri mentioned Drift, and the reason is, we spoke a lot about the retention, expansion, and the revenue aspects of customer success, but customer experience, right? Serving that moment of delight, moving that relationship to a consultative format, and productizing the delight aspects of it. I think one of the tools I forgot to mention is we use intelligence, which gives us real-time news alerts about customers, and whether they have raised a funding round or there's a change in the organization in their C-suite. We have playbooks that we have set out for CSMs within our CS tool to say, if you hear about anything like this, you do this, right? Either provide a new CXO speaking opportunity, or send them a gift if they've raised a funding round, or give them a shout out on social media. Something simple things, but I think these are things where we don't think about it from baking that into the engagement model, and we are starting to do that now. So that is what Slack and Drift have been doing it so beautifully. And for me, I just read their blogs, and I talk to their heads of customer success to understand now. And now I've set up the customer experience function within CS at ChargeBee, and we are focusing on all the qualitative aspects of customer success, so that we can proactively deliver delight. We can proactively and framework wise, right, structurally put that into our engagement model, so it is like at the back of the mind for everyone in the CS team. And so that is that. I think that part or aspect of it is what excites me about Slack and Drift, and I hope ChargeBee can become that one day.
No, amazing. I think that whole aspiration of or goal of doing delight and not just success, right? There is a qualitative layer on top of getting the numbers right and the targets right and the goals right, is that delight. And we've all seen, we Apple, we know, Superhuman, right? These are companies that genuinely talk so much about customer delight, and it shows in the outcome of the product and how successful and how happy the customers are, right? Very important point. Amazing, right? Shri, thoughts from your side? Who do you look up to? What are you reading? What are you trying to base Rocket Lane's overall DNA setup as?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't thought very actively about or felt, hey, this company has really great customer success. Not, yeah, it's just not something that's happened so far. Or I just haven't noticed and recognized it as delightful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe something I'll keep an eye out for, but nothing comes to mind as special or someone to aspire to be in terms of CS experiences I've had. Um, yeah, I think
Yeah, I
it's gonna
think
be for the future.
yeah. As you keep doing, growing and observing things, I'm sure there are various influences, but it'll be somewhere hidden there, right? Question, and we're at the past the hour mark, so maybe we can take more questions if they're coming in. One of the questions was talk a little bit about CS org structure itself, right? And Arundhati, you mentioned there's 40 people now, right? Reporting or tying into this, revenue org, right? Is there a typical org structure, ideal org structure? What have you chosen and gone with? Just throw a little bit of light so that companies that are, building can take some advice on that front.
Sure. So I report into our CRO. I used to report into our COO. And then when our CRO joined, and since we are part of the revenue org, it made sense to, align us with the revenue org. And it really helps because, we have this good engagement with the entire GTM teams and we're able to work well together also. That helps that. Secondly, I think I've organized my entire team. See, we serve to customers across the globe. So it's North America, Europe, and APAC and ANZ region. So we have split the entire team into regions and they work in the same time zone as our customers. Because that's when the engagement is successful. We don't want customers saying that, hey, I'm not able to get a response soon enough. And so it needs to be top of mind. So if you want to really have highly engaged customers, it's best to work in the same time zone. So we have teams working in shifts. From a role standpoint, I spoke about CSMs, I spoke about account managers. They are the bulk of the team. We also have CS operations, and now they've all been centralized into revenue operations as we have grown, because CS ops needed to speak to sales ops and pre-sales ops and implementation ops.
Just help us understand what CS ops mainly enables.
Sure.
Right. I heard you earlier talk about how they are the ones putting the intelligence and the data and the plumbing, if I may call it that, together to serve the frontline CS team, if you may
Sure.
call it that. But yeah, just throw some more.
No, definitely. So initially, our CS ops, I actually had 3 people. One managing the tools and automation aspects. So I spoke about the different tools we use. Anybody who's implementing it, setting it up, the automations, reminders, signals. And then the other person took care of reporting and insights. And like I said, there is so much data about customers, measuring our adoption, measuring, how churn in different slicing and dicing in different ways and giving us insights. And also post-pandemic, it's becoming really, really
Did we lose Arundhati?
Hey,
I think
yeah,
network.
looks like
Okay. We'll wait for her to come back. Shri, okay, slight different direction, right? Where do you see this going, right? What is your, view to the future of CS evolution, right? It is an emerging, domain, and lots of stuff has happened. But I'm sure if you want to think about a holy grail situation going forward, right, and you are solving one of the problems of onboarding itself, right? What else do you think are big problems that are yet to be solved that you think can be done much better in this ecosystem? Any thoughts on the future and the vision for that?
Yeah, I think the whole usage-based world is what we're heading towards, right? And in that aspect, I think more suggestions from systems based on what needs to be recommended to a customer, uh, you know, uh, uh, based on understanding their usage and where they are successful, where they're failing in adopting or using software. I think more codifying, identifying success, like showcasing to. I think uh, looking at patterns of your most successful customers and telling you, hey, this is how these customers became successful. And you may get insights that you never knew about unless you really talked to them and understood, okay, why are these customers successful? The other interesting thing I've heard at least a couple of companies talk about now is CS teams defining the ICP that you need to sell into. Saying, hey, these are the kind of customers I know I'm able to make successful. So don't get the other kind of customers. At least till a certain stage, it can actually be that you know I think as entrepreneurs and early founding teams, we get greedy and say, okay, I can also make this customer successful, I can also make that customer successful.
Yeah.
But maybe there is enough of one kind that you can focus on initially and
Really
repeatably
scale
make
that.
them successful. Yeah, skill that really delight those customers, and that's a trend I'm seeing where uh, companies are saying, hey, let my CS team inform the marketing team, inform the sales team on what kind of customers to bring in. And maybe sales CS can reject a customer saying, no, no, hey sales, don't bring this customer in. I'm not going to be able to make them successful with us. So later.
Yeah, yeah, no, very interesting. I think two parts. One, you're saying a recommendation engine for customers to use your product better, sort of a thing, correct? And then a recommendation engine for your sales and marketing team to say, okay, right customer, wrong customer, ideal customer, not ideal customer. Very interesting.
Right.
How this can get automated and more intelligent and seamless over time, in the future,
Right.
right? Arundhati, we were only, while you dropped off, we were trying to say what is the future vision. But let's go back to your just that little bit of RevOps,
Yeah.
CSR part, and then I'll come back with the same question for you as well.
Sure. So I was just talking about CS ops split into, so one taking care of tools and automation, the other taking care of reporting and insights. And we also have an admin of sorts. So, customers always say they want us to enable a feature or disable a feature, or I want, something quick. So we also have an admin who takes care of customer requests apart from, because the support request is more transactional technical, but this is more of a quick fix in their configuration, right? They want something or they don't want it. And so we have three kinds of people serving both internal. So my CS ops team always says that their customers are the CSMs, and they cater to whatever because there is so much to ask of the CSMs, right? Every day we'll be like, can you fill out this spreadsheet? Can you fill out this thing? Can you tell us who are the customers who have a positive sentiment? So automating all that and making sense of it and massaging it and putting it in a sense that is meaningful is everything that the CS ops does. And now we've centralized CS ops with sales ops and pre-sales ops, because one thing that we realized is that we were all speaking different definitions. We had different sources of truth from a data standpoint. So centralizing all this has actually helped each of these people talk. They have one source of truth, and it's just so much easier now with the increased collaboration between teams also as we've scaled. So that's how that team has evolved, and they still work with us. There's one more that's added into CS ops is CS enablement. We spoke about both internal hiring and onboarding of employees and CSMs, and external customer education. So that's the newest hire that we have made in RevOps servicing CS.
I'm just getting a sense there is a lot of inspiration that has been taken from what has happened to the evolution of the sales org.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're saying, okay, and because and that is the level of criticality we're talking about of CS, right? That sales was so critical because it directly impacts revenue and growth, and that is the level of importance that everybody is giving CS, and therefore setting up the entire CS org, sort of drawing inspiration from what all does sales need, what all does CSM need. right?
Absolutely.
That's a very interesting connection and thread, right? Makes a
So
lot
if
of
you
sense.
see Salesforce, their 2022 or 2021 revenue, 80% of it is coming from customers, existing customers. And
Amazing.
which means that investment in CS teams is that much more in all the organizations. As you see that, of course, we are not there yet, but we are going to get there soon. So that means you need to start investing as much as you, or if not more, than other teams as well.
Yeah, yeah. One of the questions that has come up in the chats from Sriram, can you give us an idea about importance of CS in early days of company and easy ways to implement that? I think we spoke about the importance already, and earlier the better seems to be the guidance, right? But one of you just want to take a quick stab at that. Easy, quick ways, early implementation, CS, right? In addition to what we've already spoken, just Shri, because you're in the early stage, I'll give that to you.
Sure, I think do more heavy lifting on behalf of your customer in early days is one thing I would say is worth looking at, and have some sort of way to understand what the customer is using, not using, how often, etc. It may be like a log rocket which shows you actually sessions of how customers are using your product. It may be something like let's say a mixed panel or analytics tool, or we even have internal sort of use retool or something like that to just show, okay, how many uh, actions has the customer done, whatever, from your DB lookup information, and show how an account is before you actually build out health scores, etc. At least you have an idea, and set up cadences of meetings with customers. Don't assume that, hey, customer bought my software, they're going to be successful. Have like, okay, every month I need to touch base with these key accounts, and every alternate month I need to touch base with these other accounts. And I think we have the advantage, like I think a lot of folks have joined from India, right? So we have an advantage of being able to service customers profitably in the smaller ones. So make use of that. I think that will curtail churn, right? So touch base with even the SMB customer, and at least dropping an email saying, hey, do you want a call? We see that we can make you more successful if we do a few things to your account. So start with having that cadence of engagement with all of your customers. If obviously if you have thousands of customers, you can't do that, but early stage definitely you can. And I think listening to customers, listening to how they talk about what value they're getting from you, will help you also define what that value is that others should get from you. And it may be they're using you in unexpected ways often, and or the value that they see is different from the value you're pitching. So talk a lot more to customers, whether they're sticking with you, whether they're churning, doesn't matter. Talk to all of them, right? So that is what I would say is like one important thing to do. And you can even use your CRM as like add tasks to your CRM to know, okay, you need to touch base with them even after the purchase. That's an easy way to get started. And yeah, I mean, I would say that that's one way to get started.
Got it. Got it. Question for Arundhati, and we were talking about this earlier. This one from Vikram. What's going to be the next thing in customer success? What's the next big evolution, disruption? What does the future look like? Walk us through your thoughts and what you are seeing.
Yeah, I think Vikram and I have discussed this a lot, and one of the things I think we touched a little bit about the customer experience aspect of it, right? So one of the conversations we were having is, and you alluded to this, Arjun, like Apple, right, the brand. So how do we make a B2B company, the brand value? How do you define it? How can ChargeBee become an Apple, right? Because we were both talking about how do you measure experience? Because you're able to measure the outcomes with retention and expansion, but how do you measure the qualitative aspects of delight or moments and things like that? And how many advocates or champions can you keep increasing for your product and for your organization? So that brand aspect of it is what we want to crack. And then that boils down to small things that we can do, right? Like I think we spoke about customer education. So we always talk about customer education being a CSM activity, and I spoke about that. But now we're looking at right when they're a marketing qualified lead, right? So we have launched our marketing teams launched something called the ChargeBee Academy, where we talk about billing ops 101 or whatever they need to know. This is also a top of the funnel activity for them, but they're also educating prospects right at that stage and then breaking it down into Charge B 101, right? So how do we construct a customer education framework right from the time they're a marketing qualified lead to renewals? So the entire gamut of their journey, at what point are they trained, and how are they trained, and who are they trained by? So that I think that is definitely going to be a game changer, because the customer's always educated and they feel like they're getting the ROI and delivered that value in terms of what they need. So it's for some customers and for some industries it can be customized. Depending on, I think there needs to be an education or a training enablement plan for customers. So that's where the enablement team also plays a role. So this, I feel, is like product marketing, CS enablement, and customer success will work together on this, and it's going to definitely be a game changer. So that is one of the things we're thinking of.
Makes sense. And I think you touched upon, there's another question here, Ankit from Whatfix, right, is asking for both the panelists, and I think you touched upon this a little bit in this current answer. Are we looking at CX being the bigger picture that would include CS, ops, account management, advocacy, professional services, etc., all under one roof in the future? Customer experience holistically, is that evolution? Is that, just your thoughts? What do you think is happening? Is that happening? You think there's a strong chance thing like that could, tie into, how organizations think about building these functions and setting it up? Just thoughts on that.
I feel like, oh, sorry, Shri. Go on.
I felt CX is one dimension, but all of it fits actually into so from a org reporting thing, either like a I would say the CCO is becoming a path, right? Chief Customer Officer, where once like CRO and CCO, I mean, I don't know how it's going to pan out, but anyone who's become a customer, how to, get them successful, how to deliver the right experience to them, how to like service them better, how to do more for them through professional services, how to like look at ops for running that function. All of it, I think, lives under a CCO, or in some cases, I think head of customer success becomes that CCO as well. And that way, I would say customer experience is one dimension to it. And that dimension needs to obviously reflect across all of the functions. But I don't, like, for example, ops does not fit under customer experience, versus CX and ops and everything else can fit under, hey, we have a customer focused function, customer success, or like there's a CCO type of person.
Understood. So kind of umbrella you see, but yeah.
I'll add a contrary answer to that. I think one of the things is, we have gone the other way. It started off with everything under one roof. And then now as you scale, you need specific leaders depending on the complexity of the product and if you're sales driven or product led growth, right? How we started with everything in under one roof, and now it's split. Like I told you, ops has gone into RevOps. We now have a PSNI, professional service and implementation team, sitting outside of customer success. Then, of course, account management is still part of CS. But I feel that customer experience cuts across all of it. It needs to be, whether it's productized, whether you see experience from a CSM, even an ops person can play a role by enabling it in a productized format. Can we have in-app experience delivered? So I think one of the things we have always asked, I think Krish in charge has always asked, how can an engineer or an ops person deliver superior customer experience? How are you thinking about integrating them into your, getting them to help your case, right, as a CS head? So I think customer experience, so that's why even though the function now reports into CS right now for us, it is a very cross-functional role where pretty much talking to product and, GTM teams and support teams, and engineers as well, because engineers play a huge, we always forget them, thinking it's a back office thing, but it's not. They unless they can empathize with the customer, they are not going to be able to build the product. So I think everybody needs to be customer experience focused.
Very interesting. I think time will tell how these things evolve, and it could be different for different organizations also, right? Depending on what you are selling, what your core DNA or approach first is, right? There's both aspects from what I'm understanding. One, there is a data-driven aspect, right? Which is metrics, data, insights, results, goals, etc., right? Revenue goals, right? And then there is just the subjective and the qualitative aspects of customer conversations, understanding, empathizing, right, and therefore reacting to those or being proactive, right, by understanding those and then helping them become more successful and be delighted, right. I think the important thing to understand here is that both of these are very, very important to finally provide the customer with the outcomes that they want, not just for the short term, but for the long term, right? And there could be, flavors. You could say it's 70-30, or it's 50-50, or it is 30-70 in the other direction. And each situation and each organization could be unique, but they are very important pillars to finally provide customer success, right? So I think it's going to be very interesting next few years in terms of what processes and workflows and how companies are going to evolve and give priority to this function. We're already seeing it almost at an equal footing to sales, right? If not already there, maybe getting there, right? Given the importance, tying all of it together to NRR, which us investors and the investor world loves, right? To look at and how it ties into the multiples. So therefore, I'm sure, and it's obviously from today's conversation that founders across the board are thinking about it that way, right? She's thinking about it that way. We're talking about how Arundhati, you're thinking about it, and how you sharing how ChargeBee leadership and founders are thinking about it, right? So it's all tying together. It's a very, very exciting time. I think we're going to see a plethora of tools come into the market that are going to solve pockets as well as the breadth of what this entire life cycle of a customer requires, right? And super interesting time, right? I think we are done with questions. Any parting thoughts, any high level views, right, before we wrap up for the session? I've definitely learned a lot today, right? Shri, last thoughts for today's conversation.
Last thoughts: level up your onboarding with Rocket Lean.
Absolutely. For the audience, Rocket Lane building something very, very cool, very sexy, right? Please look them up. She's available on all social platforms. Reach out to them. They might even be hiring amazing people if you're looking to join early stage, fast growth startup. Arundhati,
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Arjun, for having me, and it's a pleasure to. Shri and I go a long way back to college. We were college mates, and it's nice to have done this with both of you. I love it. I love my job because it's so multidimensional, and customers, I get to sell, I get to engage, I get to delight, and depending on the mood of the day, you can do what you want to do. And I think I love that aspect of customer success. And I hope more and more people look at customer success as a career option, and we are hiring. So please reach out to me if you are interested in a customer success role.
No, absolutely amazing. That's a great way to end. Think about what it takes to be a great customer success person, unique skills, and every day is a new adventure and a great experience, learning experience for anybody that is looking to join this career, right? And ChargeBee, again, much higher, much bigger stage, much larger company, but still growing very fast and doing amazing things for anybody wanting to join them. Shout out. Thanks both of you for taking time on this Friday morning / afternoon now, right? Amazing conversation, learned a lot, right? And we will put some notes together on Twitter and LinkedIn and share for everybody, right? Thank you everyone in the audience for joining us today. Episode 5, Specialetalks. We're signing off today, right? Please focus on customer experience. That's the highlight for today. Thank you, Shri and Arundhati.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.